The humming of the computer fan was the only sound in my darkened office, a software that did little to calm the frantic beating of my heart. On the screen, the YouTube upload window stared back at me, the title bold and uncompromising. My stepfather's dark secret was finally revealed, a disturbing true story. My cursor hovered over the publish button. For 10 years, the man I knew as Mark, the man who had married my mother and had lived in our home, had been a fortress of quiet mystery. Now, that fortress was in ruins, and the truth that tumbled out was more chilling than any childhood suspicion I'd ever entertained. This is that story. My childhood wasn't marked by overt darkness. It was painted in shades of quiet tension and unspoken questions. My mother, Linda, was a vibrant woman whose laughter used to fill our small Ohio house before my biological father passed away from a sudden heart attack. After his death, a gray pallor settled over our lives. Mom did her best, but I could see the loneliness eating away at her. Then, she met Mark. Mark was solid. That's the word everyone used. He was a large man, not fat, but broad-shouldered and strong, with hands that looked like they could build or break anything. He had a calm demeanor, a slow, deliberate way of speaking that could be mistaken for wisdom. He didn't smile often, but when he did, it was a small, contained event that never quite reached his eyes. To my mother, grieving and fragile, his stability was a lighthouse in a stormy sea. To me, a 12-year-old boy named Jake, he was an enigma. They married after a year of dating. Mark moved into our house, bringing with him a single, unmarked cardboard box and a profound sense of privacy. He was a long-haul trucker, which meant he was gone for weeks at a time. His returns were always the same. He'd park his rig, come inside, place his duffel bag in that single box in the corner of his bedroom, and then life would resume its quiet rhythm. He never talked about his roots, his experiences on the road, or his life before my mother. If you asked, he'd give a vague answer and deftly change the subject. The open road is all the same after a while, Jake, he'd say, or, the past is the past. Better to look forward. My mother adored him. He's a good man, Jake, she'd tell me, her eyes pleading for me to agree. He provides. He's steady. He loves us. I wanted to believe her. But there was that box. It was a plain, brown cardboard box, sealed with packing tape, always kept on the top shelf of his closet. It was the one thing in his life that seemed utterly, defiantly his. He never opened it in front of us. I once asked him what was in it, a casual, childish question. The change in him was instantaneous and terrifying. His affable mask slipped, and for a split second, I saw a flash of something cold and hard in his eyes. His voice, when he spoke, was low and carried a razor's edge I'd never heard before. That's private, Jake. You don't ever touch that. Understood. I nodded, my throat tight. The moment passed, his usual calm returning as if it had never happened. But the seed of unease was planted. That box became the symbol of everything I didn't know about Mark. In my teenage mind, I concocted wild theories. Maybe it was filled with money from some secret bank heist. Maybe it held love letters from a past life. Or maybe, in my more dramatic moments, it contained a weapon, evidence of some terrible crime. As I grew older, my relationship with Mark settled into a pattern of respectful distance. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either. He was a presence, a fixture in our home. He helped me with my math homework, taught me how to change the oil in my first car, and came to my high school graduation. But there was always a wall there, an invisible barrier I knew better than to try and cross. The box remained in the closet, a silent sentinel to his secret life. The first real crack appeared the summer I turned 22. I was home from college, and Mom had asked me to grab her sweater from her bedroom. As I reached for it, I noticed the corner of Mark's closet door was ajar. And the box was gone. A cold dread trickled down my spine. He wasn't due back from a run for another 3 days. Why would he take the box with him? I tried to dismiss it. Maybe he'd finally decided to throw its contents away. But the feeling wouldn't leave me. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I went onto the National Sex Offender Registry website. My fingers trembled as I typed in his name and our zip code. Nothing. A wave of relief washed over me, followed by shame. What was I thinking? He was just a private man. But the relief was short-lived. A few weeks later, Mark was home. He seemed more on edge than usual, jumping at small noises. He'd sit for long periods, staring out the kitchen window, his big hands clenched into fists on the table. My mother noticed it too. "Is everything okay, honey?" she asked him one evening over meatloaf. "You seem a million miles away." "Just tired, Linda," he said, forcing a smile. Long haul. Lot of construction on I-70. I looked at his hands. The knuckles were white where he gripped his fork. He was lying. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in October. Mom had gone to visit her sister in Cleveland for the weekend. Mark was supposedly on a run to Nashville. The house was mine alone. I was in the basement, looking for an old photo album, when I decided to finally clean out a cluttered corner that had been a dumping ground for years. As I pulled out a stack of old newspapers and broken picture frames, my hand brushed against something solid and cardboard. My heart stopped. It was the box. Not on a high shelf, not guarded and protected, but shoved unceremoniously behind a rusty toolbox and a bag of old clothes, as if hidden in a hurry. The tape on one flap had come loose, curling back to reveal a glimpse of what was inside. It wasn't money. It wasn't weapons. It was documents. A moral war erupted inside me. This was a violation. This was crossing a line I had respected for a decade. But the memory of his panicked eyes when I'd asked about it as a child, his recent strange behavior, the sheer, compelling mystery of it all, it was too much. With a trembling hand, I reached out and pulled the box into the light. The first thing I saw was a birth certificate. The name on it was not Mark Roberts. It was Michael Joseph Walsh. The date of birth was the same as Mark's, but the place was different, a small town in West Virginia I'd never heard him mention. Beneath it was a social security card with the same alias. My blood ran cold. An alias. Why would a long-haul trucker need an alias? I dug deeper, my breath coming in shallow gasps. There were old pay stubs from a mining company, a folded, faded photograph of a young woman with sad eyes, and a tarnished silver locket. And then, at the bottom of the box, I found it. A single, folded piece of paper, brittle with age. It was a news clipping from a West Virginia newspaper, dated 25 years ago. The headline screamed up at me, "Fatal Mine Collapse Investigation Focuses on Safety Violations, Company Officials Face Manslaughter Charges." My eyes scanned the article. It detailed a catastrophic collapse at the Black Creek mine that had killed 6 men. The investigation pointed to willful negligence by the site managers, who had ignored multiple reports of unstable structural beams. The company, in a desperate attempt to limit liability, had allegedly pressured certain officials to destroy evidence and falsify safety reports. One of the junior managers named as a central figure in the cover-up was Michael J. Walsh. The room tilted. Michael, was responsible for the deaths of 6 men. He had helped a corporation bury the truth, literally and figuratively. He had changed his name, fled his old life, and built a new one on a foundation of lies and the graves of those miners. The good, steady man, who had comforted my mother, who had sat at our dinner table for 10 years, was a coward and, in the eyes of the law, a criminal. The revelation was a physical blow. I sat on the cold concrete floor, the clipping held in my shaking hands, trying to reconcile the two images in my mind, the quiet, reserved Mark Roberts, and Michael Walsh, the man who had run from his past. The darkness I had always sensed wasn't a monster in the classic sense, it was the deep, corrosive shadow of a terrible, unforgivable mistake. I heard the creak of the floorboards above me. A key turned in the front door. He was home, early. Panic seized me. I scrambled to shove everything back into the box, my hands fumbling, the paper rustling like accusatory whispers. I just managed to push the box back into its hiding place and stand up, pretending to look at an old painting, as the basement door opened. Mark stood at the top of the stairs, his large frame silhouetted against the light from the hallway. He didn't come down. He just stood there, looking at me. The air grew thick and heavy. "Jake," he said, his voice flat. "What are you doing down here?" "Just looking for an old photo album for Mom," I stammered, hoping my voice didn't sound as strained as it felt. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze sweeping over the basement, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on the cluttered corner where the box was hidden. He knew. I don't know how, but he knew I had found it. "Find anything interesting?" he asked, his tone deceptively casual. My mouth was dry. This was it. The moment of confrontation I had both dreaded and, in some deep part of myself, desired for years. I could lie, preserve the fragile peace of our home, protect my mother. Or I could speak the truth and watch our world shatter. I turned to face him fully. "I found a newspaper article, Mark. Or should I call you Michael?" The silence that followed was profound. The affable mask he wore for the world didn't just slip, it shattered. The man on the stairs seemed to shrink and expand at the same time. The carefully constructed wall of calm crumbled, leaving behind a raw, exhausted man weighed down by a quarter-century of guilt. He didn't deny it. He didn't get angry. He just seemed to deflate. He slowly descended the stairs and walked past me to an old armchair, sinking into it as if the bones had been removed from his body. He put his head in his hands. For 25 years, he whispered, the words muffled by his palms. For 25 years, I haven't had a single peaceful night's sleep. And then he told me everything. The story was far more complex and human than the villainous narrative I had constructed in my head. Michael Walsh hadn't been a greedy executive. He was a young, ambitious junior manager, eager to please his bosses. When the first safety reports came in, he was told to file them appropriately, a corporate euphemism for making them disappear. He was assured the issues were minor, that the engineers were being overly cautious. He wanted to believe them. He wanted a promotion, a better life. The day of the collapse, he had been above ground. He heard the roar, saw the plume of dust. He knew, in that instant, that he was complicit. The company higher-ups immediately went into damage control. They called a meeting. They were polite, well-dressed men who spoke in calm, reasonable tones about mitigating exposure and protecting the company's viability. They presented him with falsified reports and told him to sign. They implied, without ever directly stating, that his job, his future, and perhaps his personal safety were on the line. Terrified and morally bankrupt, he signed. He lasted 3 months in the ensuing investigation. The weight of the 6 dead men, the faces of their widows on the news, the quiet disgust in his own father's eyes, it became too much. The company was eventually fined, but no individual ever saw the inside of a jail cell. Michael Walsh, however, was legally and spiritually doomed. One night, he packed a single box, withdrew his savings, and disappeared. He bought a fake social security card, learned to drive a rig, and became Mark Roberts, a man with no past. I didn't kill those men with my own hands, Jake, he said, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. They were filled with a pain so deep it was almost tangible. But I might as well have. I signed the paper that made their deaths acceptable. I traded their lives for my own freedom. Every mile I've driven since has been an attempt to outrun that moment. He looked at me, a desperate plea in his eyes. Your mother, Linda, she was the first good thing that had happened to me since it all fell apart. She was my chance at redemption, at a sliver of a normal life. I couldn't tell her. I was a coward. I am a coward. The anger I had felt began to dissolve, replaced by a complicated, painful brew of pity and horror. He wasn't a monster. He was a broken man who had made a catastrophic, cowardly decision and had been running from it ever since. The dark secret wasn't a hidden propensity for violence, but the crushing, lifelong burden of guilt. The question, of course, was what to do now. The truth was a live wire in my hands. Telling my mother would destroy her. It would shatter the image of the man she loved and introduce a grief and betrayal so profound I wasn't sure she could survive it. But keeping the secret made me complicit. It meant living a lie alongside him. We sat in the basement for what felt like hours, 2 men bound together by a terrible truth. In the end, we made a pact, a fragile, painful truce. He would tell her. He would confess everything to my mother himself. It was the only way for him to even begin to atone, and the only way for us to have any hope of rebuilding something real from the ruins of our family. The conversation that followed, when my mother returned, was the most difficult night of our lives. The tears, the disbelief, the raw, gut-wrenching betrayal, it was all even worse than I had imagined. But through the pain, something else emerged. A painful, arduous path toward a new kind of truth. Michael, began seeing a therapist. He started the long process of legally untangling his identity. He even reached out to a lawyer to see if there was any way, any possible way, he could now face the charges he had escaped so long ago, to finally give the families of those miners some form of closure, even if it came 2 decades too late. Our family was broken, but it wasn't destroyed. It was being reassembled, piece by painful piece, with honesty as its new, shaky foundation. The man I had feared for so long was now just a man, flawed and burdened, finally stepping out of the shadows of his own making. I finally clicked the publish button. The story was no longer a dark secret festering in our basement, it was a confession, a warning, and a testament to the fact that the truth, no matter how disturbing, is the only thing that can truly set you free. The screen changed, confirming the upload. My stepfather's dark secret was finally revealed. And in its chilling, uncomfortable light, we were all finally learning how to live.